Welcome into a brand new episode of Tribal Council Chat, the flagship show of the Reality Realm podcast network. As always, we are your hosts. My name is Bruce Heller.
And my name's Brett Parnell.
And let's dive in. Episode 9 of
Episode
Survivor
9.
48. What are your overall thoughts on the episode?
This was great. I think it was really fitting this week that before the episode we had to vote on for 50. Do we want to have more or less twists on 50? And this episode gave us really just that old school blindside that I think the fans have wanted to see for a while.
Speaking of the vote, we forgot to get to that last week, so let's
We did.
do it now.
Okay. I guess the real point of discussion is the twist. You can't really, talk about like what the immunity necklace will look like, but
Yeah.
if people see it, I voted for option B with the dragon. That looked cool.
They did. The option A, I almost voted for it because it gave me Hunger Games vibes, and I love the Hunger Games series.
Interesting.
But I went with B because it's more complex. It's more interesting. I am happy though because with the how often do you want twists one? I've heard Probst talk about this, and like he thinks the game would be more boring if it was more straightforward and didn't have all these twists. And he goes, but if the fans want it, we'll do that, even if it's more boring than they think it'll be. So
Yeah.
I really thought when I heard it was going to be twists, or how much, that it was going to be like one of the earlier questions. And I forgot what the actual question was, but they basically worded it as, do you like fun or do you hate fun?
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were going to do that this time, and they actually worded it normally. It didn't feel super leading with how they worded it. So
Yeah.
that was good. I was happy with that.
Yeah, that was good. And also, I like the fact too that it's not like they were asking people, do they want to get rid of Twist in Survivor? Which, in that case, I would agree with Jeff. It would be boring, but I think that most people agree that it's just got been a little overkill lately,
Yeah.
and that you almost have to plan for when you apply to the show. Am I going to leave my life behind to win or lose a game of random chance?
I mean, sort of. It doesn't solely come down to that.
Yeah.
You can get around it.
But there's so many people going out left, right, and center over things that, like, look at Bianca this season, over things that she didn't even have a choice to not play.
But even though I said it was a good idea at the time, if she had not told Cedric right before Tribal that she didn't have a vote, she isn't going home that episode. She still went home at her own fault. So, like, yes, too many votes are being taken, but also that's not the only reason I feel like people are going home. People are going home because of how they act, like play it afterwards. Also,
Oh, of course.
it's like sports. People want to act like referees and bad calls are the only reason their team lost a game. It's never the only reason you lose a game, in my opinion,
Yeah.
at least. I get tired of
Right.
people act like their team only lost because of the refs, but I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. So, player of the week. Who do you got?
Player of the week this week. I gotta go with Eva in this case for how she handled that advantage.
That's a fantastic answer, and I forgot to wear it for the pod, but I have my
Nice.
Hockey Club shirt here
I
that I'll
love
wear
it.
on the show next week, hopefully, or next time we have a guest on. But it has to be Eva. She got the advantage. She was kind of caught going to get the advantage and got no blowback from that. And the people that caught her, she went and told before they asked her about it. So
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get to it, but I
yeah,
definitely think it was maybe misplayed by other people.
I think Shaheen might have misplayed it, but people have thought Shaheen misplayed it. these are all people in his alliance. Why would he go tell someone outside of his alliance that someone in his alliance was
Yeah.
getting an advantage? Of course he's going to tell someone they're both working with. But he said something funny about on Twitter I'll get to then. So diving in, we get back and kind of some of the first stuff we see, and we see this a couple times throughout the episode, is in confessionals we learn that Kamilla is coming after David hard now.
Yeah.
But her confessionals about him are so funny to me. Like, she has no qualms calling him out on what she believes to be dumb stuff that he's doing
That is true.
and doesn't sugarcoat it at all. And it's really funny to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Kamilla had a great episode again. She's, I think, playing a very winnable game.
Yeah.
Especially if we're going to pick a winner from outside that power alliance.
Yeah. My next note is at sunrise, the majority alliance is kind of together, and David goes right back to work pitching Kamilla, which is again a little much. He just won't drop it. And Kyle says to us in a confessional that it feels like things are David's way or the highway right now.
Yeah. That was really interesting. It's definitely, I think, a good shadowing moment going into what happens at the end of the episode because Kyle's right. David is in a point where he's starting to get, like you brought up, Bruce. Well, I was still cheering for him. You were saying he was getting cocky in that challenge, and his game all started to go downhill really at that moment.
Yep. For sure. And so the next scene we have after that is Kyle and David are hashing it out once again on the beach. And Kyle tells us that David's new number one has to go and that he has to go also. So this has got between last week and this week, Kyle and David's relationship has now gone with we're alliances, we're working together, we're in the same group, to this person is difficult to work with, I don't know how we're going to move on, to Kyle saying David has to go. And this relationship deteriorated right in front of us really quickly.
Did it ever? And that really, I guess, shows us like the point of the game that we're at. When relationships will deteriorate quickly because you're so close to winning.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this episode is where I would draw the line to go from, we've moved from the early merge to the end game.
You know, I just realized at the merge, there was such a threat of, all 6 original Sivas are here. They could go strong Siva 6. 3 of them are now gone, and we're only on like maybe the 4th episode post merge. So
it shows you that even though they could have gone strong Siva 6, how the other players didn't know that, but based on what we saw as the audience, they were never going to go Siva 6.
Even though Mitch wanted to.
Yeah.
And he tried to pitch it last week at some point, but yeah.
Well, but even so, Charity's been gone before that.
Yeah. Siva is still not as bad of a collapse as Nami, though. Because with Nami, everyone knew they wouldn't stick together. With Siva, there was at least some mystery before they completely collapsed on themselves.
Yeah.
Shout out to Nami for being one of the messiest tribes of the new era, if not the messiest. Not Absolutely. The biggest disaster, but the messiest. And so this next scene we get is the sequence of Eva going for her advantage. So we see the scene of her getting up and sneaking out during the night And as we see her walking down to the beach, we just see this creepy shadow in the background, probably about 10 or 15 feet back.
Which turns out to be Shaheen.
It does. And so he goes and he wakes up Joe. And someone must have said something on Twitter about how calm Joe was. Because let me find Shaheen's tweet that I referenced, said I was going to read.
Of course, Joe is perfectly calm because he wants Eva to get every advantage she can.
This is 2 days ago. Shaheen tweeted this. Trust me, if I was caressing your face in the middle of the night, you'd be calm too. Which is just funny to me. I like Shaheen.
Yeah.
He's fun. He's got a sense of humor.
Oh, he does definitely seem it.
So we get to Eva's journey, and she has an extra vote, but she can risk it for something more and can pick one of two bamboo shoots. And she either gets a safety without power or she loses her extra vote. So,
and I really like this because, sorry, go ahead. You were going to tell us what she does. I jumped into my thought too early.
No, you're good. She decides to take the risk. And before we say the result, what are your thoughts on it?
My thoughts on it was both. I like the fact that you have this opportunity and can play these games a chance, but don't have to. And I also really like, and I'll get to this after you say what happens, but how Eva handles it.
Yeah, so she takes one of the two bamboo shoots. She gets safety without power. And then she has another decision to make. And she can risk that again, choosing between three bamboo shoots. And one has a full idol, and the other two cause her to lose her safety without power. And my note was, I wouldn't risk it this time. She already has an idol. Take the advantage you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I really liked about why I like that she took the risk once but didn't take it a second time. As much as you would think an extra vote would be a big advantage, and I guess it can be when you have so many people losing the vote, it's an advantage that we've seen really not just in the new era, but even in New School Survivor, that hasn't worked all that much. Notably, probably the most famous one is at Final Tribal Council. Scott just bashing Ty for saying in relation to a extra vote that he put on Michelle, you used your advantage to put two votes on a woman who wasn't going anywhere. In contrast, the safety without power is safety. We saw Rachel win $1 million last season because of this advantage, and I don't think that because of the timing that this cast has seen that happen. So I don't think they'll be as worried about the safety without power as, say, the 49 and 50 casts that are out in Fiji right now.
True.
Because
they know
if it wasn't for Saul getting that advantage to Rachel, Rachel does not win that game.
They know it exists, though.
Oh, they know it exists, but they've seen Jeremy bleep it up, for lack of a better term.
Oh, that one still makes me sad.
I know.
Because that was the turning point where, as I was rooting for Jeremy and the alliance he was with.
And I was rooting for one of Jeremy's allies.
That was the point where the Sarah, Tony, Ben, Denise alliance just started steamrolling from there. So that's one of the craziest advantage plays at Tribal, though, because of the standoff between him and Sarah. Where they both stand up, then they both sit down, then they both stand up at the same time again. And
that was amazing television.
And Jeremy ends up being first, and he would have gone home if he didn't play it, but Tyson gets sent home from his group, and the other group got numbers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Shout out to Tony, though. He played a great game that season.
Oh, he did. But, no, in the last season, though, with Rachel playing it correctly, it works to the point that it wins Rachel $1 million. and our cast has not seen that yet, like I was saying. So I think that this is a perfect advantage to have in your back pocket for when you think you might need it or when somebody else might play an idol.
Yeah, for sure.
If you have even the gist of somebody has an idol, you can go, I'm not getting idled out tonight. Goodbye.
Yeah. Or in that same scenario, you also have an idol. So
That's right.
you can guarantee you don't get idled out and keep your vote. So,
Or if you're at final six and you're Eva, you can just play safety without power. Say, screw this alliance that's all these big players. I'm going to play my own game now and then use your idol at final five and make fire at final four, and you've won the game.
you know what would be wild is they get to five and she still has both, plays one of them and gives the other to Joe.
Yeah, that would be impressive.
I doubt they both or either of them last till five, but
Yeah.
the next.
I think she'll last till five. I don't think Joe will.
No, I meant her advantages. I don't think either one of them make it to five without being played.
Fair.
So the next scene we see is her telling Joe and Shaheen and Kyle what had happened during the night. And Shaheen tells us that it builds trust that she told them this and that he isn't coming for her. Which has made me happy as someone rooting for her because I was not sure what Shaheen was going to do with that information.
Yeah, that was interesting to see. I personally don't think Shaheen played this great because he did, like we say, tell Joe, who we already know has Eva's back 100%. I think the best move, if I'm Shaheen, yes, he's working with Joe and Eva. He doesn't need to out Eva in front of the entire tribe, but he can do something that's simple, which is say nothing until he talks to Eva.
Yeah.
And then he can get whatever information Eva has if she wants to keep Shaheen in her alliance.
Well, she ended up telling them before he was gonna go talk to her. We don't know that he wasn't gonna go out.
That's fair.
The next day.
I just wouldn't have told Joe about it. I would have kept that to myself.
Yeah, I don't know what he thought Joe was gonna do there.
Yeah.
And so next up, we see David pitching Kyle or Shaheen or Joe. Sorry, my dog just came running into the room, dragging a toy back and forth like a tornado, and I didn't know what was happening.
That's okay. I can tell.
Stop squeaking so loud. Okay, we're just going to deal with the squeaky toy sounds for a little while. But Kyle is pitching to Mary and I think to someone else later, separately, that Kyle or Shaheen or Joe needs to go.
Woo! Senators up 3-2. Side note.
No, sorry, I had this wrong. David was pitching Kyle or Shaheen to Joe. I misread my note. And so this is when Joe tells us that David is coming off as being very paranoid, and he's concerned about that.
Yeah, which is where everything, like we said, kind of all starts to fall apart for David.
Yeah.
He wants to both play this game that's all based on honor, but then he's not really doing it at this point anymore, which Chrissy was right. That was always going to fall apart.
Yeah. The interesting thing here is that David accuses Joe of going back on his word by voting Chrissy when he said he'd do Kamilla at the reward.
Yeah.
And Joe's says the group made that decision and he didn't go back on his word. Which is interesting that this is what David wants to pick on because David voted for Chrissy also.
That's right.
Like, this was a group decision. This wasn't Joe leading the charge, flipping the vote on you.
Exactly.
Last week it wasn't. This week it was. But
Yeah.
again, David just really not playing things well lately.
No, it's. I think David started off the game very well. He seems to be a very nice guy, someone who's entertaining, but didn't really have the strategy aspect to play Modern Survivor.
Yeah. And so, what my other note here is, like, as David and Joe are having this whole conversation where David pitches Kyle or Shaheen, and David pitches Kyle or Shaheen, and Joe doesn't want to hear it. David's response is, "Well, you went back on your word last time." Eva's sitting in between them this whole time.
Yeah.
That must have been so awkward for her, just sitting through that conversation.
Absolutely, that must have been.
And so we also see Kyle tell Kamilla about Eva's safety without power, which is interesting because Joe, Shaheen, Eva all think like Kyle is 100% with them. They don't know he has another alliance that he's more loyal to. So I'm interested if that's gonna come to a head at some point. Because everything like they're telling him, Kamilla also knows through him.
Yeah.
So my next quote here is Joe saying, "I trust Kyle, I trust Shaheen, and I trust Eva. I don't know about David. I thought I had a good read on him." This is where we're starting to see the tide turn on David, even within his own alliance.
Exactly. And I think we've kind of touched on that. But like we said, he's just not playing a good social game or a good strategic game.
He's not.
And I have officially been the first player to have a fantasy score that is locked in.
Well, is your score completely locked in?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
I have nobody left.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that. Well, you weren't the first one to be mathematically eliminated, I don't think. So you've got that going for you. But our next scene is a bit of a more fun scene. We see some people swimming in the ocean, and Star tells us in a really funny confessional that it reminds her to sign up for swim classes because next time Jeff sees her, she's gonna be a swimming pro. She's so funny. I love Star so much.
Yeah. Star's been a character that I never expected to last very long, and she's been great this season. Her pregame video I just thought was so over the top that I didn't expect her to stay in and be able to socially fit into this environment, but I'm impressed.
Yeah, for sure. And so we go back to all the drama within the majority, and Kyle kind of sits down with Joe.
Leafs are up 3-3.
And Kyle explains to Joe why he's been feeling the way he has without David, and gives us a really emotional backstory about being arrested for underage drinking and his time in jail and how he continued law school while in jail. And this was a really cool scene.
This was an amazing scene. First of all, as a Canadian, I just want to say, how do you get arrested for underage drinking and go to jail?
You get caught drinking alcohol under the legal age.
That here would be like, just make better choices, guys, go home.
No, it's absolutely make better choices, but also, I did love this scene. I can hear voices in my head of people, not just Twitter. I'm not going to come at Survivor Twitter as hard as last week we did this week.
Is that
across the
possible?
online community of, oh, too much backstories. We don't need all the sob stories. I don't want to hear it. These like hearing people's stories are fun. This scene was incredible.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're starting. Personally, to me, I know I've said that before, so I can't say I'm completely um perfect on that side, but I almost think that the frustration with it tends to be, at least this is just my view, I reserve the right to be wrong, but reserve comes from where the whole backstory thing started in editing, and notably how I and millions of other people didn't want to sit down to Survivor to hear the word COVID in the first like few New Era seasons.
Oh yeah,
But nowadays, I think they are casting people with some great stories that, I mean, I'm all for it. It's been amazing to hear about, like, Kyle in this case, or um, how Eva's dealt with her disability, or how many other people, but you name it.
yeah.
But I think it's got better in the latter New Era seasons.
And so our next scene is we see Joe and Eva talking because he wants to see where her head is at, and he kind of wants to subtly see where she's at on David to make sure they're both protected. But Joe is pretty much tired of David at this point, but
Yeah.
isn't going to make that move unless Eva is on board too. And I love this. I love this mindset of we're a team. We're going to do this together.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a great moment. Who knows? Will something this be another step in Joe and Eva's relationship that shows us how, say, kind of like a Sarah and Tony, one of them gets to the end and one of them is on the jury arguing for that person to win? Or is this going to be a situation where at some point either David or Eva, like they've kind of said in Tribal before, has to blindside each other in order to win the game themselves?
Yeah. And so the last scene we see before the challenge is an Eva confessional, and she's saying she wants to keep the alliance strong as long as possible, keep them together. And my
And
note,
that's kind of what I was just saying. As long as possible is the key words.
yeah, and
Not till day 26.
my note at the time was honestly, I think this is smart. Once Kyle or David go, Joe or Eva could be next. So just keep everyone there, and
Yeah.
target won't shift onto you because you're all targets. So we move into the challenge, and my first note is that Jeff does a fake British accent as they walk in.
I totally missed that.
Really?
Yeah.
Darn it, I was going to ask you as somebody who's like sort of British, not really, what you thought of the accent. So
I totally missed it.
it was like as they
That's
were
funny.
walking in. It was hilarious. And we're also playing for reward, which is peach cobbler. And I wrote yummy,
Yeah.
but on the survive like the chat BCC with a bunch of former Survivor players, they were kind of trashing on peach cobbler a little bit, and I did not appreciate that. So the way this challenge works is we're holding on to a handle that keeps these jaws above our heads closed. And if we fall off our perch or the ball falls out of the jaws, we're out. And it comes down to Joe versus David. And when it's at the final two, Joe's ball is at the very end of the jaws, and David's ball is still right where it started.
And it just drops.
And Joe wins, which
Yeah.
is just wild.
It was wild to see. Exactly one of those cases, though, that we see Probst mention in every season. If you're ever in that spot, try to hold on for 5 seconds longer because you might win even if you think that it's almost done.
Yeah, for sure. And so Joe wins immunity. Joe chooses to take Mitch on reward with him. And Jeff asks if that's an alliance move, and Joe says it's just a human move, which I love.
Yeah.
Jeff tells Joe to pick one more person, and he picks Shaheen. And then he gets to pick a third person, and he picks Eva. And it's really funny considering the next scene, but my note was, what are the odds that David will be upset by not being picked?
True.
And then the scene we get back to camp, not necessarily about not being picked, but David was so upset about losing the challenge that Mary was having to console him.
Yeah, and I get that because when you're so close to winning something, it's got to be frustrating, especially if you think there's any chance of going home that night. But Survivor is, and the more you see this, the more you listen to other past players, just such an emotional experience.
Yeah. And so, Dave, where was I? Joe wins me. Here we are. And so, David and Eva at the reward decide that they want to put votes on Mitch. I don't think that at the reward, they just told us this in confessional around the same time period. David and Mary. Sorry, I wrote the wrong name. This was back at camp. I am a mess this week, I guess. They decide they want to put votes on Mitch, and I'm thinking, interesting. You've spent 2 weeks pushing Kamilla like aggressively hard, and she didn't win immunity, but now you're switching your target to Mitch. I don't really know why this was the case.
Yeah. I didn't get why this was the case either. It just seems to be like, why would Mitch be a target here when he's not playing as strong of a game as Kamilla or as untrustworthy of an alliance partner as David?
Well, David and Mary aren't going to put a target on David.
Yeah.
But I just don't get why they've been on Kamilla so hard, then all of a sudden switch to Mitch.
Yeah, I don't get that.
But we get a really cool scene here. I think it's a confession.
Oh, great. This is going to be fun.
I think this.
We have overtime between Ottawa and Toronto for the third game in a row.
Wow. So Shaheen tells us in a confessional, I think this confessional is while they're at reward, that he started planting seeds about David 4 or 5 days ago, and we start getting these little flashback clips of him doing that were really cool. And Shaheen says this quote, "It feels like a war I've already prepared for. Welcome to the party, David. I've been here for a while. Let's party." And I love this from Shaheen. Great job planning ahead by him. Great job planting seeds for what you want way ahead of time before you put the plan into action.
Yeah.
And so when they get back from reward, David and Mary immediately start pitching Eva on Mitch and saying they can't trust Kyle and Shaheen, which you can't wait. You have to do this the second they get back. And Eva's reaction, and she tells us this in confessional, is that they are causing paranoia and they're saying things about her friends. And she's kind of we learn later in the episode she's conflicted about this because she wants to keep the alliance together. She said she was going to work with David. She wants to stick with that, but he's actively going after the people she's closest with.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are your kind of thoughts on that scene there?
It just, like you were saying, is a bit confusing.
Yeah.
As to where we're going here. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm interested to see. So Kyle and Shaheen, oh my gosh, I actually went to a different note right there. My phone's too touchy. Kyle and Shaheen want to vote David. Eva's hesitant, like we just talked about, wants to talk to Joe first to make sure they're on the same page again. And basically, the two of them just agree to what they agreed to earlier, that they're going to stick together no matter what. And our last scene before Tribals, we really see Eva struggling with the decision of Mitch versus blindsiding David. And so going into Tribal, there's a lot of talk about approach and if you can win being honest and straightforward. And again, for like the third Tribal in a row, we're talking about the same thing.
Are we going to be talking about honesty and straightforwardness and transparency as often as we were when in Tocantins?
I was thinking it's reaching the level of Edge of Extinction, where the thing every Tribal was the pilots and the passengers.
Yeah.
Except it's not an annoying analogy this time. At least it's like actual discussion on game strategy.
Okay.
Don't worry. Probst will find a way to turn it into an analogy, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure he will.
And so David says, this is funny. He says, I could be wrong. I forget what he was saying, but he goes, I could be wrong. It could be me going home. And I wrote down, I think it is.
Yeah. That reminded me of Cat in One World.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Blindsides are fun.
Yeah.
Proceeds to get blindsided. And we have another Tribal quote. Kamilla says that David needs to be aware of his jury management because he may like his game, but do the people he puts over there, and she's pointing at the jury bench over there, like his game. And Star recaps what Kamilla said in a hilarious way. I didn't write down what Star said, but it was funny. I remember that.
Yeah, I think that was a great moment from both Kamilla and Star, because David might be commenting every week about how he's playing this honest and integral game, but his jury management is so bad. In contrast, and this is what's the most important, I think so far Kamilla's jury management is the best.
Yeah. And so my last note from the talking part of Tribal, Joe's talking about trust versus paranoia. And ultimately, David does go home. So what are your final David thoughts on the season before we say goodbye to him?
I drafted David.
Well, yeah.
You guys were, I guess it's kind of mixed. You guys didn't think it was a great pick. I mean, the fact that what everyone else playing thought was not a great pick still went to the final 8 isn't bad.
I didn't think it was terrible.
It felt like one of those moments where when I made my draft pick, everyone was like, why?
I probably didn't love it, but I didn't think it was just absolutely terrible. But
fair enough.
He did okay.
But yeah, he did okay. It was decent. David was certainly entertaining, none the least, and was great to have on television, even if he wasn't the best Survivor player.
Yeah,
and
he didn't become insufferable until the last 2 or 3 episodes he was on.
And I'm hoping that this really helps him propel his career in Hollywood.
Yeah, hopefully it does. And so moving forward, who do you have for a line blindside first boot?
Speaking of what I just said, my line blindside first boot is going to be related to David. David was a stunt performer, so behind the scenes in the entertainment business. So I am going to give you the names of 3 people who have performing / behind the scenes roles in entertainment.
Okay.
So your first pick is not David, but it's somebody from season 48, and that's music executive Thomas Crottinger. Your second name is going to be from Survivor San Juan del Sur, Broadway performer and aerialist, similar to a stunt performer, Reed Kelly. And your final name is going to be director and someone who's now world famous after just wrapping up season 3 of The White Lotus, Mike White.
So I'm going to align with Thomas. It seems like he's straightforward with his allies. We saw him with Bianca and with Joe and with Shaheen. And like, as sneaky and as he had the ability to be, it was never towards his allies. So I trust Thomas. I'm going to. Who is the second name you said again?
Reed from San Juan
That's
del
right,
Sur.
it's Reed. Okay, I'm first booting Reed because I just don't like the two of us with Joe well. I think he'd get on my nerves. And I'm going to. And I also don't want Reed on the jury if I blindside him based on his jury speech. Which leads me to blindside Mike White.
Excellent.
And I don't think he'd be bitter at me for it.
Before I move on, I've just got to ask you, are you aligning with Thomas for gameplay or because you want a personal connection to Olivia Rodrigo?
Yes. Mostly gameplay, though.
Okay. I am going to also first boot Reed. There's no way you want him on the jury after that speech. It's probably one of the most infamous speeches, regardless of what you think of Missy's game in Survivor history, only overshadowed by Corinne.
See, I really don't like Reed or Missy on that season, to be honest with you. So I'm kind of indifferent on that. I felt bad for Missy's daughter watching her be berated like that, but
yeah.
Also, Sue Hawk, you said Reed was only surpassed by Corinne. Sue is up there.
Well, yeah, that's on another level. That speech from season 1 is just television history.
Yeah, for sure.
But Sue, I would even say, is more of, to an extent, she at least was talking about the game and her views on it, which is exactly what you should do on the jury. She just was very forthcoming and aggressive with it. Totally
talking
fair.
Talking about the game to an extent.
But the other two was just...
If I walked past you on a desert road and you were dying of thirst, I wouldn't give you water. It's not exactly about the gameplay of surviving.
I guess. I just took that speech as less personal than those two that I mentioned.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I am going to flip it. I am going to blindside Thomas in this situation and align with Mike. The reason is Thomas went home pre-merge. So I don't know how good of an ally he would be moving forward. I know Mike's got to the end, and I know that Mike was hampered in final by the fact that he's a very successful and wealthy individual, and that was before the White Lotus.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how much more that would impact the jury based on the fact that Mike has had, despite things like School of Rock and Nacho Libre being great films, Mike has only become 100 times more successful in the last few years.
You mentioned me aligning with Thomas to possibly meet Olivia Rodrigo. An upside to aligning with Mike White along those lines is meeting Jack Black would possibly be awesome.
Yeah. And
I've
another upside,
seen a movie with that guy in it and not thought it was funny.
That is true.
A hilarious human.
Oh, I know. I love his films as well. Most of which Mike works behind the scenes on.
I have never once played the video game Minecraft. I want to see the Minecraft movie solely because of Jack Black.
But I've got to add in too, you mentioned that there's a option to interact with Jack Black. There is also an option if you were to be a top ally of Mike, if you're Carl, Natalie, Kara, or Angelina, to potentially make a cameo in The White Lotus.
True. You can meet Jack Black. You can get on White Lotus. You could meet Jennifer Coolidge. I think she was on White Lotus, so Mike knows her. I'm sticking with blindsiding him, though.
Fair. What are your names that you're going to put out this week?
My theme is a lot more simple-minded, and David went home this week. So my theme is people named David.
Interesting.
And so I was gonna throw David Wright in here, but I feel like of the Davids that have played Survivor, he's kind of clearly the best player. So I'm gonna
Hmm.
make things a little bit more interesting.
That's interesting because I would have probably first booted him. I am not a David Wright fan.
I love his story on Millennials versus Gen X. He goes after Kelly pretty hard on 38, so I don't like him on that season. But also, like, a big storyline on 33 was him versus Zeke, and I feel bad saying this because of what happened on Game Changers. I'm
Yeah,
just not a huge Zeke fan. I don't like his gameplay style. He only has one mode, and that's super aggressive.
fair enough.
And we saw the him versus David on 33. We saw a little bit of that with him and Andrea on 34. I just his game style is too aggressive for me. But
So
he's
who
like
are
a
the
nice
three
guy.
Davids?
What?
Who are the three Davids?
Sorry, you sidetracked me.
No
I
problem.
sidetracked myself. The three Davids are what's his name from 22? I just had it. David Murphy,
Yeah.
all-time awkward reunion moment. David Murphy proposing to
But
Carolina.
also all time one of the great campaign jury speeches.
Great jury speech, great reunion moment proposing to his then girlfriend Carolina, who's saying "shut it down" while he's talking or mouthing it. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
She says yes and gets invited up to join them for the reunion. Super awkward moment, but we also have David Jelinski, first boot from 46, who quit on two different things. And we have David Sampson, who was also a first boot, but has been on our show.
Yeah. I am going to, with those three, align with David Sampson. I think he was a player who knew the game. He clearly had a good sense of the game when you and I talked to him, but just went home first and was stuck with the Brains tribe, which I mean, the Brains tribe in 28 is rough.
I
For
produced two finalists on another season, though.
Yeah, somehow. I don't know how. That leads me to blindside. Um, hmm. Who am I gonna blindside here? I'm gonna blindside David Murphy in this spot because
Yeah.
of that jury speech. I think if you can get him on the jury, but he's still working with you and wants you to win the game, you're in a great spot. And that leads me to first boot David Jelinski, sorry to our friend Kevin. I just know the least about him in this spot. I know you two have had a chance to book. Oh no, he wasn't at the event. Somebody called him with Kevin.
Bryce did.
Bryce did, yes.
And Bryce recognized us the second party we went to.
Oh, nice.
So that was really cool. I
That would be cool. I've got to get back to one of those.
I'm going to first boot
The,
Jelinski. Part of what you said is I know the least about him.
yeah. The
And
only Bryson Wen Presents party that I've got a chance to go to so far was the first ever one.
nice. And I'm first booting Jelinski. I know the least about him, and what I do know doesn't inspire a ton of confidence to me. If you look at Sweat versus Savvy and you look at the journey, not that I'm thinking he would quit on me again, but the fact that I can't rule it out kind of scares me.
Yeah.
Also, before I move on, shout out to a funny moment from this show in a past episode where I was referencing him quitting on two different things in an episode and said, I'm not going to name the player because someone we know is a fan of him. And Brett's response was, oh, you mean Jelinski? Me and Kevin throw a lot of shade at each other. I tried to be nice that one time. And so I was nice, and Brett made it to where the joke was still there and I didn't have to make it. So that was a hilarious moment. Not on purpose. He genuinely didn't know who I meant at first, but still funny. I am not. Oh. See, I want to align with Samson because like I've been a fan of him for years, and just hearing his podcast and him go on another podcast I like. But my fear is if I blindside David Murphy, is he then going to like aggressively jury campaign for the finalists that didn't blindside him?
I don't think so because when we look at what he did with Rob, and I mean, who knows based on the situation, but I think that he was. I think David's a player who's just going to go campaign for the best player.
True, but Rob didn't really blindside him.
No, he didn't.
So
you don't know.
I'm gonna blindside him because I know Samson's game playing a lot better, and he made some mistakes on Kagyan. He came out firing way too quickly at Garrett, and I think he's learned from that. And super smart dude. And so,
but Garrett was one of the worst players in the history of the franchise.
yes, but Samson came out swinging at him way too hard for it to be day one.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to align with Samson and blindside Murphy and first boot Jelinski, but I also probably would have blindsided David Wright too if I had a fourth person to put into any of the three slots.
Interesting.
Because we'd work together well. He's proven on his first season he can be a really good player, but I don't want to sit at him next to the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and with that being said, check out all the other Reality Realm content, Pit Stop Pals, New Generation Challengers, Redbubble merch store. And with that being said, grab your torches and head back to camp. Bye, everyone.
Before you do that,
yeah.
Whenever, in case anyone was wondering about New Generation Challengers, that show will be back whenever MTV posts the cast for season 41, which is going to start this summer sometime. So the cast release will probably be sometime next month.
Yeah, and can't wait for that to start. So we will look forward to that. And bye, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye.